What if an ancient civilization left behind a warning? A warning so disturbing that even the people who discovered it stopped talking about it. Buried beneath the sands of Iraq, a tablet over 4,000 years old claimed humanity was being watched, not symbolically, not spiritually, counted. And according to the inscription, the counting may already be complete. To understand why this might be one of the most disturbing tablets in human history, we have to go back to 1876. Counting is a simple act, but in the shadow of this ancient tablet, it takes on a different weight. According to those who study its lines, the message is not about gods or empires, it is about humanity itself, observed and measured. Supporters claim the text describes a process that is neither spiritual nor symbolic, but coldly mathematical. Every life added, every generation born, all tallied by an unseen hand. There is a reason this idea unsettles so many. The threat is not a flood or a fire, not a curse or a promise, but a number. The suggestion that someone or something has been keeping track and that there is a final total, a limit set long before anyone alive could remember. If interpreted literally, the warning is not about the past, but about a threshold that might already have been crossed. Skeptics argue it is only a myth, a metaphor for fate or the cycles of nature. But the act of counting transforms myth into a kind of surveillance. It asks who is doing the watching and what happens when the count is finished. Even without proof, the idea lingers that beyond the sky, beyond what we can see, the sum of humanity has been weighed, and that the silence which follows is not empty, but full of consequence. George Smith's life played out in the half-light of museum basements and ancient dust. In December 1872, he stood before the Society of Biblical Archaeology, holding a clay fragment excavated from the ruined palace of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh. The artifact, now catalogued as K3375 in the British Museum, was no legend. It was heavy, real, and broken. Smith's translation of the flood narrative stunned his Victorian audience, but the tablet itself offered only glimpses, 3 columns on each side, cuneiform lines interrupted by cracks and missing pieces. Its story was incomplete, its meaning forever shaped by what time had erased. The British Museum records are clear. K3375 is a 7th century BCE relic, a physical anchor for centuries of speculation. It remains in the museum's Near Eastern Antiquities department, sometimes displayed, always under the careful eye of curators. High-resolution photographs reveal the damage, jagged edges, missing signs, a puzzle with too many pieces lost to history. Every interpretation since has been forced to navigate these silences. Smith's own story ended abruptly. In August 1876, at just 36, he died of dysentery in Aleppo, his final notebooks unpublished, his fieldwork unfinished. Rumours swirl about missing journals, about discoveries that never made it home. The British Library holds some of his notebooks, but the absence of others lingers, feeding the sense that something vital slipped through the cracks. The artifact remains, fragmented, catalogued, and deeply enigmatic. Whatever secrets it holds are guarded not just by the clay, but by the gaps left behind. Long before the first lines of cuneiform were pressed into wet clay, the floodplains of Sumer gave rise to a civilization that would alter the course of human memory. The Sumerians did not simply settle the land, they transformed it. By the 4th millennium BCE, their cities pulsed with the routines of writing, calculation, and ritual. The earliest proto-cuneiform tablets, unearthed from the ruins of Uruk and Jemdet Nasser, record not myths, but inventories. Barley, sheep, labourers, and debts, all meticulously counted. This was not a world of vague legend, but of numbers and names, of contracts and ledgers. In Sumer, mathematics was not a luxury. Their sexagesimal system, counting by 60s, still echoes in every ticking clock and every measured circle. The Sumerians harnessed the wind with sail-powered vessels, carving the first known ships from the reeds and timber of the southern marshes. They shaped the wheel, first for pottery, then for carts that rolled across the floodplain. Legal codes, like the one attributed to Ur-Nammu around 2100 BCE, inscribed the rules of justice in stone, centuries before Hammurabi. Above them, the sky was not empty. Sumerian scribes tracked the movement of the moon, the wanderings of Venus, the slow march of the planets. Their calendars mapped the lunar cycle with a precision that would guide agriculture, ritual, and kingship. Some records hint at an awareness of the precession of the equinoxes, a cycle spanning nearly 26,000 years, though whether this was calculation or cosmic intuition remains debated. Each achievement is carved into the archaeological record. The tablets, wheels, and seals survive in museum cases and beneath layers of ruin. Their knowledge was real, their reach astonishing. This is why, when whispers arise that Sumerians described the sky as a ceiling or spoke of watchers above, the world listens. The line between myth and science, between measured truth and memory, runs thin here. The AWE is earned. And so the question lingers. If a people could do all this, what else might they have known? A line of cuneiform pressed into clay more than 4,000 years ago sits at the heart of the mystery. Supporters of the literal reading point to passages that, in translation, describe the sky not as an endless void, but as a vault, a ceiling with edges, walls, and an end. The words themselves are ordinary: roof, wall, closure. But in the hands of later translators, the roof becomes a vault, the walls become boundaries, and the closure becomes a limit. The phrase lingers: the sky is a vaulted ceiling, the vault has walls, the walls have an end. No critical edition of the tablet contains these exact words. The original Akkadian uses terms that mean roof and sides, describing the construction of a boat, not the architecture of the cosmos. Yet, in the retelling, the metaphor grows heavier. The vault is no longer a covering of wood, but a dome that contains the world. The number 12,000 appears, 12,000 Beru, a measure that, if taken as distance, stretches far beyond the horizon. Some compare it to the height of the atmosphere, the reach of the Van Allen belts, or the orbital shell where satellites drift in silence. These parallels are striking, but they remain just that, echoes, not evidence. Skeptics warn that the language is symbolic, a poetic way of describing the heavens as a place set apart, unreachable except by the gods. The Sumerian cosmos is layered, they argue, but the layers are not blueprints. The numbers are sacred, not scientific. The vault is a mythic shelter, not a measurable dome. Still, the claim will not dissolve. If the sky is a ceiling, then something must exist above it. If the vault has an end, what waits beyond? The silence in the text is not empty. It is the space where certainty fails and possibility begins. In the mythology of ancient Mesopotamia, the Igigi are not the architects of fate. They are not the Anunnaki, whose names echo through the oldest lists of gods. The Igigi belong to a different order, lesser, younger, burdened with labor in the stories that have survived. According to the Atrahasis myth, they toiled in the heavens, digging the canals of the world until the work became unbearable. Their rebellion forced the hands of the higher gods, leading to the creation of humanity as a replacement workforce. But it is what happens before their revolt that draws the eye of those searching for watchers above. Supporters of the literal reading claim the Igigi, Yai, did more than serve. They describe a class of beings stationed above the earth, not as rulers but as observers. The language is careful. The Igigi are said to occupy a fixed position in the sky, a place from which they could see everything below. Some compare this to a coordinate in space, an unmoving vantage point, like the Lagrange L1 point, where modern satellites linger, always between Earth and Sun. There are no cuneiform lines that describe such a location, but the metaphor persists, growing sharper with each retelling. A single phrase from the myth lingers: they measure the days of men. For those who believe, this is the clue that turns the sky from shelter into surveillance. The act of measuring is not gentle. Every day, every life, watched and tallied by eyes that never close. The implication is chilling, a ceiling above, and behind it something counting, waiting, perhaps judging. Skeptics point to the symbol. In the old stories, measuring the days is a way to speak of fate, of the span of life granted by the gods. It is not a census, but a mythic calendar. Still, the possibility remains, uneasy and unresolved. If the sky is a vault, and if the Igigi are stationed above it, then what is their purpose? What kind of being is content to watch, to keep the tally, to stand at a fixed point above the world and never descend? The silence of the tablets does not answer. It only deepens the question, leaving the sense that somewhere in a place just out of reach, the watchers remain. A number sits at the core of the legend, sharper than any myth, more unnerving than any lost god. 7.412 billion. Not a round prophecy, not a sacred symbol, an exact tally, as if stamped by an accountant's hand. Supporters claim the tablet speaks this number aloud, that it is the final sum, the point at which the counting stops and something else begins. The claim is not ancient poetry. It is clinical, almost bureaucratic, a ceiling set so high above the world of Sumer that it could only belong to another age. The contrast is staggering. In the early Bronze Age, when the first cuneiform tablets were pressed, the world's population hovered near 27 million. The entire human story, from the marshes of Sumer to the peaks of Egypt and the valleys of the Indus, could have fit comfortably inside a single modern city. To the Sumerians, a number like 7.412 billion would not have been a warning. It would have been incomprehensible, a figure that outstripped the boundaries of imagination itself. Yet the number lingers. In 2011, the United Nations announced the world had reached 7 billion. By 2022, the count edged past 7.4 billion. The alleged threshold, 7.412 billion, lands with uncanny precision, as if the ancient scribe had glimpsed a future census. According to those who believe, the moment the count is reached, the tally ends. And with the end of counting comes descent, a word left hanging, heavy with threat. Descent of what, or whom, or into what darkness is never explained. Only the mechanism remains, a watcher's ledger, a line crossed, silence falling. Skeptics trace the number to modern hands, not ancient clay. They point to the absence of any such figure in the cuneiform record, to the way the number mirrors recent population milestones, to the eerie convenience of its timing. But the effect is the same. The existence of a limit, whether myth or invention, transforms the present into a threshold. The world becomes a room with a ceiling, the air above pressed close, the future uncertain. And somewhere in the space between history and rumour, the count continues. Each birth, each life, another step toward an end no one can see. A memory older than writing lingers in the soil of Mesopotamia. Some interpreters, reaching far beyond the boundaries of archaeology, invoke the Younger Dryas, a time when the world shuddered under sudden cold, when ice returned and waters rose. They point to the year 11,034 BC, a date stitched together from ice cores and myth as the moment the world nearly drowned. In this telling, the Sumerian flood is not just a legend, but a coded recollection of a disaster so immense it scarred the human mind for millennia. Flood stories echo from Sumer to Egypt, from the banks of the Euphrates to the hills of Greece and the highlands of India. Always the same refrain. The sky darkens, the foundations of the earth tremble, waters rise, and the old world is swept away. Some claim the Sumerian tablets are not mere stories, but the last archive of a vanished city, a civilization erased by a flood, its knowledge preserved only as fragments in clay. The suggestion is seductive that beneath every myth lies a memory, and beneath every memory, a warning. According to the sequence attributed to the tablet, the prophecy unfolds in 3 strokes. First, the sky grows dark, as if the ceiling itself is closing. Then the ground shakes, the order of things collapsing under invisible weight. Finally, something descends, unseen, unnamed. Its arrival marking the end of the count. The language is spare, almost clinical, but the image it conjures is stark. The world is not free, but penned in, watched from above, its fate decided by forces that never speak. And then comes the line that hangs in the air long after the words have faded. We are the cattle of the silent ones. In those 8 words, the mystery sharpens. Humanity, not as children of the gods or masters of the earth, but as livestock, numbered, tended, and ultimately expendable. The phrase does not appear in any critical edition of the Flood Tablet. Its origin is disputed, its meaning debated. Yet it persists, whispered from translation to translation, carrying a chill that outlasts any scholarly rebuttal. Skeptics push back hard. They trace the phrase to a Sumerian proverb, a line about unspoken wealth or the quiet power of the herd. They argue that the darkening sky and trembling earth are ritual metaphors borrowed from the myth of Inanna's descent, a story of winter's death and spring's return, not of cosmic surveillance. The prophecy, they say, is a pattern found in every ancient epic. The world threatened, the gods silent, the outcome uncertain. Mistranslation, confirmation bias, and the human need for meaning do the rest. In the gaps between broken lines, imagination takes root. Confirmation is impossible. The clay is silent where it matters most. What remains is a tension that refuses to resolve. The flood, the ceiling, the watchers, the count, each element is both too ancient to verify and too familiar to dismiss. The story ends not with an answer, but with a question. If we are being watched, what are we being watched for? And if the sky truly has a ceiling, what waits in the silence above? Tonight, satellites orbit above a world whose population just crossed 8 billion. According to the tablet, if read literally, that number once marked a cosmic threshold. Skeptics dismiss it as myth, while others see a warning no civilization should ignore. The sky overhead remains silent, sealed, or simply indifferent. Sometimes the line between ancient imagination and impossible knowledge is thin enough to haunt us. What do you believe is watching?